Hello, English learners, and welcome back to another exciting episode of our podcast, where we discuss important topics to improve your English. If this is your first time tuning in, we're thrilled to have you here. I'm Adam, and joining me as always is my amazing co-host, Sophia.
Hi everyone. We're so excited about today's episode because we're tackling a topic that so many of you have asked us about: how to communicate better in English. Whether you're learning for work, school, travel, or just to connect with people, we've got practical tips and real-life strategies to help you on your journey.
That's right, Sophia. We'll be diving into everything from building vocabulary to improving pronunciation, boosting fluency, and even dealing with those moments when you feel stuck or nervous while speaking.
And we're not just talking theory here. We've got personal stories, fun exercises, and listener questions to make this episode as engaging and useful as possible. So, if you've ever felt overwhelmed or unsure about speaking English, this is the episode for you.
Let's start by sharing my story. Growing up, I didn't speak much English. I remember my first English class being so overwhelming. I couldn't pronounce half the words, and the grammar rules felt impossible to understand. I was so scared of making mistakes that I barely spoke in class. But I realized something important over time. The more I avoided speaking, the slower I was learning.
That's such a relatable experience, Adam. What helped you get past that fear?
It was really about small, consistent steps. I started watching TV shows in English, at first with subtitles in my own language, and later switching to English subtitles. I also used to write down any new words I heard and try to use them in conversations. The first time I successfully held a conversation in English, it felt like such a victory. I'll admit it wasn't perfect, but I learned to embrace those little wins.
I love that, Adam. My journey is a little different. I've been teaching English for years, and through that I've seen firsthand how challenging it can be for learners. One of my students, for example, was so shy about speaking that she would only communicate through writing. But with practice and encouragement, she started participating in group conversations and even gave a short speech at the end of the course. Watching her progress was so inspiring.
That's amazing, Sophia. I think stories like that show how important patience and support are when learning a language. Did you ever face challenges with your own English skills, even as a teacher?
Absolutely. English isn't my first language either, and when I was learning, I had trouble with pronunciation. I remember once mispronouncing a word during a presentation, and the audience laughed. It was embarrassing, but instead of giving up, I made it a point to practice more. It's all about turning those moments into motivation.
That's so true. I think everyone learning English has moments of frustration or embarrassment, but those moments are part of the process. For me, the key takeaway is this: don't let mistakes hold you back. They're signs that you're trying, and that's what really matters.
And we're here today to share the strategies and tips that worked for us and our students, so you can make faster progress and feel confident communicating in English.
Let's dive into one of the main reasons why so many people find it difficult to communicate in English: fear of making mistakes. It's something I struggled with a lot when I first started learning. I used to overthink every sentence I said, worrying about getting the grammar wrong or using the wrong word.
Exactly. And it's not just grammar. There's also the pressure to sound perfect. A lot of people get stuck in this mindset that if they make a mistake, they'll look unprofessional or foolish. But the truth is, mistakes are a natural part of learning. It's how we grow.
Right. And it's also about vocabulary. When you're starting out, you don't have that big of a word bank. So, you end up using the same simple words over and over. That can make you feel like you're not expressing yourself fully, which can be frustrating.
Absolutely. And when you don't know the right word, you might feel stuck mid-conversation. That leads to another barrier: feeling lost when you don't understand what someone else is saying. There's also cultural differences in communication styles. In some cultures, people speak more directly, while in others, indirect communication is preferred. These cultural differences can lead to misunderstandings, even if both people are speaking English.
That's a really good point. I remember once, I was speaking to a colleague from another country, and I thought I understood her, but we were actually talking past each other because of how we interpreted certain phrases. It was embarrassing, but it made me realize that communication is not just about the words. It's about understanding the context and cultural nuances too.
Exactly. And let's not forget about nerves. It's easy to freeze up when you're speaking a language that's not your first. You start overthinking, and that makes it even harder to express your thoughts clearly.
Totally. I still feel that way sometimes in certain situations. But I've learned that the more I speak, the easier it gets. And the more I focus on getting the message across rather than being perfect, the more confident I feel.
Exactly. The real challenge is learning to embrace imperfections and moving past that fear of judgment. As long as the other person understands you, that's what matters most. In fact, the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll feel, and it'll start to flow naturally.
Exactly. So, while these challenges are real, they're not insurmountable. Today, we're going to explore practical ways to push through these barriers and feel more confident in your English communication.
And remember, communication isn't about perfect grammar or vocabulary. It's about connecting with others and expressing yourself. We'll share strategies that will help you do just that.
Now that we've tackled some of the reasons why communication can be challenging, let's talk about one of the most important things you need to feel confident in English: a strong vocabulary. A bigger vocabulary means more options for expressing yourself and a deeper understanding of what others are saying.
Exactly. But let's be real. Building vocabulary isn't about memorizing random words from a list. It's about learning words in context, understanding how they're used, and making them a part of your daily life.
That's a great point. When I first started learning, I focused on high-frequency words, the ones that pop up in everyday conversations. Words like hello, thank you, good morning, and so on. Once I had those basics, I felt more comfortable talking to people. But as I advanced, I realized that learning phrases and expressions is just as important as individual words.
Yes, it's all about context. Learning phrases like, how's it going? Or, what's up? Helps you sound more natural when speaking. In fact, native speakers use fixed expressions all the time. So instead of learning isolated words like delicious, try to learn the phrase, this food is delicious. It makes it easier to remember and use in conversations.
And let's not forget about repetition. It's how we really internalize vocabulary. Whenever I learn a new word, I make sure to use it in sentences right away. I'll write it down in a notebook or say it out loud. The more you use it, the more likely it'll stick.
Exactly. And one tool I swear by is flashcards. Whether it's a physical set or using an app like Anki, flashcards are a great way to review vocabulary regularly. What's really cool about Anki is that it uses spaced repetition, which means it'll show you words at intervals that help you remember them for the long term.
Another method I've used is to learn in themes. For example, if I'm studying food-related vocabulary, I'll learn not just the names of fruits and vegetables, but also verbs related to eating, like to chop, to fry, to bake. That way, I'm learning vocabulary that fits into real-life scenarios. When you learn words in groups, it's easier to make connections and remember them.
That's such a smart strategy, Adam. I also recommend using vocabulary in real situations. If you're at a cafe, try to name things around you in English. This is a cup. The table is made of wood. Or, if you're reading a book, try to pick out new words, and then use them the next time you speak with someone.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes when using new words. It's all about practice. When I first started using new vocabulary, I made a lot of mistakes, but every mistake was a chance to learn more.
Exactly. And one more tip, try to keep a vocabulary journal. Every time you come across a word you don't know, write it down. Include the definition, an example sentence, and maybe even a picture if that helps you remember. This journal can be a great reference when you're speaking, and it's also a fun way to track your progress.
Another fun way to learn is through media, watching movies, listening to podcasts, or even reading books in English. You'll encounter a wider range of vocabulary and learn how words are used in different contexts. Plus, you get to hear the pronunciation.
That's so true. And don't be afraid to go beyond your comfort zone. Read things that challenge you, maybe a little bit above your level. It forces you to learn new words, and it can be incredibly rewarding when you start to understand and enjoy more complex materials.
So, to recap, 1. Start with high-frequency words and phrases. 2. Learn vocabulary in context, not just individual words. 3. Use repetition to reinforce your learning. 4. Keep a vocabulary journal. 5. Practice in real-life situations. The key is consistency. The more you expose yourself to new words and use them, the stronger your vocabulary will become.
Exactly. Vocabulary isn't just a tool, it's the foundation for everything else in communication. The more words you know, the more confidently you'll be able to express yourself. All right, now that we've built a strong vocabulary foundation, let's move on to something that many English learners struggle with: pronunciation. It's one thing to know a word, but if you can't pronounce it correctly, it can really hold you back in conversations.
Exactly. I think pronunciation is often overlooked, but it's just as important as vocabulary. When I started learning English, I had a lot of trouble with some sounds that don't exist in my native language, like the TH sound in words like think or this. It took a lot of practice to get it right.
Yes, those tricky sounds are a challenge for many learners. But the good news is that pronunciation is something you can improve with consistent practice. The first thing I recommend is breaking down words into syllables. This can help you focus on the correct stress and rhythm of the word.
Great point. I remember when I was first learning, I was told to break down complex words into smaller parts. For example, the word pronunciation, instead of trying to say it all at once, I would say it in chunks. Pronunciation. That helped me get the rhythm right.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use a dictionary with audio features. Most online dictionaries allow you to hear the correct pronunciation of a word. You can listen to it as many times as you need until you feel comfortable saying it yourself.
And speaking of pronunciation, one of the best ways to improve is through shadowing exercises. What's shadowing, you ask? It's when you listen to a sentence or a short clip in English and then immediately repeat what you hear, trying to mimic the speaker's rhythm, tone, and intonation as closely as possible.
Yes, shadowing is an excellent way to improve your pronunciation. It helps you focus not just on individual sounds, but also on how sentences flow together. You get to hear how native speakers link words and stress certain syllables. And the best part? It can help you sound more natural when you speak.
Exactly. One fun exercise I like is using tongue twisters. They might sound silly, but they're a great way to practice tricky sounds. For example, try saying, "She sells seashells by the seashore." If you can say it quickly and clearly, it means your pronunciation is improving.
Another great method is to record yourself speaking and listen to the playback. This will help you catch mistakes you might not notice when you're speaking. You'll be able to hear if you're stressing the right syllables or if there's any mispronunciation.
Yes, and remember, slow and clear beats fast and unclear any day. A lot of learners get caught up in speaking too quickly, but it's much better to speak clearly and at a comfortable pace. Native speakers will appreciate your clarity, and it'll give you more time to think.
That's a really important tip. And if you're not sure about how to pronounce a word, don't be afraid to ask someone. Native speakers are usually happy to help, and most people appreciate that you're making an effort to improve.
Exactly. And if you don't have anyone to ask, you can use language apps or even YouTube to find pronunciation guides for almost any word. There are a ton of resources out there.
Totally. And let's not forget stress and intonation. In English, the way you stress certain syllables can change the meaning of a word. For example, record is a noun when the stress is on the first syllable, record, but it's a verb when the stress is on the second syllable, record. Intonation, how your voice rises and falls, also helps convey emotions and intent.
Good point. Intonation is especially important for things like questions and expressing feelings. For example, when you ask a question, your voice usually rises at the end. How are you? It's something to be aware of when you're practicing, as it adds nuance to your speech.
Definitely. So to wrap up, 1. Break down complex words into syllables. 2. Use dictionaries with audio features. 3. Practice shadowing native speakers. 4. Try tongue twisters to improve tricky sounds. 5. Record yourself and listen for areas of improvement. 6. Focus on clarity and avoid rushing. Remember, pronunciation is a skill that improves with time and practice, so don't get discouraged if it's not perfect right away.
Now that we've worked on vocabulary and pronunciation, let's talk about fluency. This is where a lot of learners get stuck, wanting to speak faster or more smoothly, but not knowing how. Fluency isn't just about speaking quickly, it's about speaking naturally and confidently.
Exactly, Adam. Fluency comes with practice, and the more you practice speaking, the more natural it becomes. One of the best ways to boost fluency is to focus on practice over perfection. Don't worry about making mistakes, just keep speaking.
That's such a great point, Sophia. I remember when I was working on fluency, I used to feel frustrated when I couldn't find the right word or had to pause in the middle of a sentence. But over time, I realized that even pauses are okay, as long as you're still trying to get your point across.
Right, and it's all about reducing those pauses by practicing common phrases and expressions that can help you move smoothly through conversations. If you already know how to say "what I mean is," or "let me explain." Swing. These can be lifesavers when you're trying to collect your thoughts.
Yes, and that's where chunks of language come in handy. Instead of focusing on individual words, try to learn phrases or chunks of language that go together. For example, instead of learning just the word interesting, learn the phrase, "that's really interesting." The more you know these chunks, the less time you'll spend thinking about what to say next.
Exactly. And another great fluency booster is conversation practice. Even if you're speaking with yourself, having regular conversations in English is key. You can practice with a friend, a language exchange partner, or even with a tutor. The more you engage in real conversations, the easier it becomes to speak fluently.
Another way I worked on fluency was through shadowing, this time with full sentences or dialogues. I would listen to a conversation and repeat it exactly, trying to match the speed and rhythm of the speakers. This helps you get used to natural speech patterns, including pauses and changes in tone.
Shadowing is a great tool for sure. And one technique I recommend is thinking in English. It sounds a bit challenging, but the more you do it, the better your fluency will be. Instead of translating from your native language, try to think directly in English. For example, when you're planning your day or describing something to yourself, do it in English.
I love that. And another tip is engaging with content in English. Watch movies, listen to podcasts, or read books and articles that interest you. The more you hear natural English being spoken, the more familiar the sentence structures and word choices will become. You'll start to pick up on how native speakers communicate, and it'll help you sound more natural when you speak.
That's so true. And if you're a visual learner, try writing down what you hear. After listening to a podcast or watching a video, take a few minutes to jot down phrases or sentences that you liked. Then, use those phrases in your own conversations.
Another strategy I used was focusing on topics I enjoy. If you love talking about sports, food, or travel, those are great areas to build fluency in. When you're passionate about a topic, the words and ideas come to you more easily, and you can practice without overthinking it.
Absolutely. And one last fluency booster that's so important is learning to tolerate discomfort. It's natural to feel uncomfortable when you're practicing, but the more you push through that discomfort, the faster you'll improve. The key is to stay consistent and practice regularly, even when it feels awkward. All right, now that we've covered fluency, let's talk about something that's equally important: confidence. Building confidence in your conversations is what will allow you to speak freely without constantly worrying about mistakes or getting stuck.
Confidence is often the key to improving your English. When I first started speaking, I was so afraid of making mistakes that I avoided conversations altogether. But the truth is, the more you speak, the more confident you become. It's a cycle. Practice leads to improvement, and improvement leads to more confidence.
Absolutely. One thing I always tell my students is that confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from trusting yourself to get your point across. You're allowed to make mistakes, but don't let them stop you from speaking.
Right. And even if you don't have all the words, there are ways to work around it. If you can't remember a specific word, try describing it instead. For example, if you forget the word bicycle, you can say a thing with two wheels that you ride. Native speakers will understand, and it shows that you're thinking on your feet.
That's such a great point, Adam. It's about problem solving during a conversation. Sometimes when you don't know a word, you have to find a way to express it using different words or gestures. And it's totally okay. Native speakers do this too.
Exactly. Another confidence booster is preparation. If you know you'll have a conversation on a specific topic, like a job interview or a meeting, take some time beforehand to learn related vocabulary and practice key phrases. Being prepared helps you feel more in control.
Yes, preparation is key. But what about those spontaneous conversations, like when you're meeting someone for the first time or just chatting with a friend? How can we boost confidence in those moments?
Good question. One strategy is to take a deep breath and remind yourself that it's just a conversation. You don't need to be perfect. In fact, most people appreciate when you're genuine and make an effort. If you don't understand something, ask for clarification instead of pretending you understand. It's okay to say, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" Or, "I didn't catch that, could you explain?" It shows that you're engaged and want to learn.
Exactly. And another technique I love is positive self-talk. Before and during conversations, remind yourself that you're doing great. Instead of focusing on possible mistakes, focus on the progress you've made. Positive thinking can really help you overcome nervousness.
That's such an important tip, Sophia. When I feel nervous, I try to remember that mistakes are part of the learning process. And honestly, most people will respect you for trying. You'll rarely find someone who's going to judge you harshly for making an error in a conversation.
Yes, and it helps to remember that conversation is a two-way street. Both people are working to communicate, so if you make a mistake, the other person is usually focused on understanding you, not on correcting you. In fact, most people will even help you if you get stuck.
That's so true. And another confidence booster is body language. Believe it or not, your body language plays a huge role in how confident you appear. Stand tall, make eye contact, and smile. This will not only make you seem more confident to others, but it'll also help you feel more confident.
Absolutely. If you act confident, you'll start to feel more confident. Plus, using hand gestures or showing enthusiasm while speaking can help express yourself more clearly, even when you're not 100% sure about the words you're using.
And one last tip for building confidence is to celebrate your successes, no matter how small. Every conversation you have in English is a victory. Whether you held a 5-minute chat or explained something complicated, give yourself credit for making the effort.
Exactly. It's all about the mindset. Confidence is built over time, and every step forward counts. So to summarize, 1. Trust yourself to communicate, even if it's not perfect. 2. Prepare for conversations to feel more in control. 3. Use positive self-talk to combat nervousness. 4. Ask for clarification if you don't understand. 5. Remember that most people are focused on understanding you, not judging you. 6. Use confident body language to support your words. 7. Celebrate each step forward, no matter how small.
Now that we've covered vocabulary, pronunciation, fluency, and confidence, let's talk about one of the most important aspects of language learning: practicing in real-life situations. This is where everything comes together, and it's how you really put all that theory into practice.
Exactly. It's easy to study vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar from a textbook or an app, but nothing beats real-world practice. When you're speaking to real people in real situations, that's where you truly see your progress.
That's so true, Sophia. I remember feeling nervous when I first started speaking with native speakers, but I quickly realized that even if I made mistakes, they appreciated the effort, and I learned a lot from those conversations. You can't replicate that in a classroom setting.
Absolutely. And one of the best ways to practice is through language exchange. You can find a language partner who's a native English speaker, and in exchange, you can help them practice your native language. It's a win-win situation because both of you get to practice in a relaxed conversational setting.
That's a fantastic way to practice. If you can't find a language exchange partner in person, there are plenty of apps like Tandem or HelloTalk that connect you with speakers from all over the world. Even video calls can help you practice speaking and improve your listening skills.
Speaking of apps, another great tool I recommend is conversation clubs or language meetups. Many cities offer regular meetups where you can practice with other language learners and native speakers. These groups are usually very welcoming, and you get to meet people from all walks of life.
Yes! I joined a local conversation group when I was learning, and it made such a difference. It wasn't about perfect grammar or pronunciation. It was about just speaking and getting to know others. That relaxed atmosphere helped me build confidence and feel more comfortable in conversations.
Exactly. And the beauty of practicing in real life is that you encounter all sorts of situations. Maybe you'll need to order food at a restaurant, ask for directions, or explain your plans to a friend. Each of these situations teaches you how to communicate effectively in different contexts.
That's right. And it's important to remember that real-life practice doesn't just mean conversations with strangers. You can practice with friends or family members who are also learning English. If you're lucky enough to have an English-speaking friend, take every opportunity to have conversations with them.
Definitely. And even if you're not in an English-speaking country, there are plenty of ways to practice in everyday life. For example, when you're shopping, try to describe things in English. Or, when you're watching a movie or listening to a podcast, try to pause and repeat sentences out loud. This helps you practice speaking and get comfortable with the flow of the language.
Great point. It's all about integrating English into your daily life. I also started labeling things around the house in English, like the fridge, mirror, and bookcase. So I would see these words every day and start associating them with the objects.
Yes. Immersing yourself in English is one of the most effective ways to improve. You can also follow social media accounts, watch YouTube videos, or listen to English podcasts related to topics you enjoy. By doing this, you're constantly exposed to the language in a way that feels natural.
Another great way to practice is by traveling. If you have the opportunity to visit an English-speaking country, take full advantage of it. The real-world exposure is priceless, and you'll find that your ability to understand and speak English improves significantly when you're surrounded by it 24/7.
Definitely. And for those who can't travel right now, virtual travel experiences can be a great alternative. You can explore online communities, virtual tours, or even play language games to immerse yourself in English in a fun way.
And don't forget about making mistakes. Real-life practice means that sometimes you'll feel nervous, and sometimes you'll say the wrong thing. But that's how you learn. The more you practice, the more comfortable you get, and the fewer mistakes you make over time.
Exactly. The goal isn't perfection, it's communication. Every time you try speaking in real life, you're building your skills and getting better. So, Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. Now, let's talk about something every language learner experiences at some point: setbacks. Whether it's hitting a plateau, making embarrassing mistakes, or feeling like you're not improving, these challenges are a natural part of the learning journey.
That's so true, Sophia. I think the first thing to remember is that setbacks are normal. They don't mean you're failing. They're just part of the process. In fact, they often mean you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, which is exactly where growth happens.
Absolutely, Adam. One common setback is hitting a plateau where you feel like your progress has stalled. This can be really frustrating, but it's important to understand that plateaus happen to everyone. It's just your brain taking time to consolidate what you've learned.
That's a great way to look at it. When I hit a plateau, I like to shake things up by trying new methods. For example, if I've been focusing on vocabulary, I'll switch to practicing speaking or writing. Changing your routine can help reignite your motivation.
Great tip! Another challenge learners face is making mistakes in conversations. It can feel embarrassing, especially if someone corrects you in the moment. But mistakes are such a valuable part of learning. They show you what to work on.
Exactly. I used to be so afraid of making mistakes, but once I realized that even native speakers make them, I felt less pressure. Instead of focusing on perfection, I started focusing on communication. If the other person understands you, that's what really matters.
That's a great mindset. Another setback is losing motivation. Maybe you're tired, busy, or just not seeing the progress you expected. During those times, it helps to remind yourself why you started learning in the first place. Is it for work, travel, or personal growth? Keep that goal in mind.
Exactly. And sometimes taking a short break can help too. Stepping away for a few days can recharge your energy and give you a fresh perspective. Just make sure the break doesn't turn into giving up entirely.
Good point, Adam. Also, setting smaller, achievable goals can help you regain motivation. For example, instead of saying, "I want to become fluent," set a goal like, "I'll learn 10 new words this week," or "I'll practice speaking for 10 minutes a day." These small wins add up over time.
Yes, celebrating small victories is so important. Another thing that can help is finding a community of learners. Whether it's a language meetup, an online forum, or a study group, being around others who are on the same journey can keep you inspired and accountable.
Absolutely. Sharing your struggles and successes with others can make you feel less alone. Plus, you might pick up some tips and tricks from people who've overcome the same setbacks.
And let's not forget about self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. Learning a language is a long journey, and it's okay to have off days. Instead of criticizing yourself, focus on how far you've come.
Exactly, Adam. Progress isn't always linear. Sometimes you'll take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but as long as you keep going, you're moving in the right direction.
So, to summarize, here's how to deal with setbacks. 1. Understand that plateaus and mistakes are normal parts of the process. 2. Change your routine if you feel stuck. Try new activities or focus on different skills. 3. Embrace mistakes as learning opportunities, not failures. 4th, revisit your goals and remind yourself why you're learning. 5. Take short breaks if needed, but stay committed. 6. Set small, achievable goals to rebuild momentum. 7. Join a community of learners for support and inspiration. 8. Practice self-compassion and celebrate every bit of progress.
Setbacks aren't the end of the journey. They're just speed bumps along the way. If you keep pushing through, you'll come out stronger and more confident on the other side. All right. One of the best ways to improve your English is by engaging with native speakers. It might seem intimidating at first, but it's one of the fastest and most effective ways to build your confidence and fluency.
Absolutely, Sophia. Speaking with native speakers exposes you to natural language, the way it's actually used in daily life. You'll pick up on slang, idioms, and even cultural nuances that you can't always learn from books or apps.
Exactly. But let's address the elephant in the room. Many learners feel nervous about speaking with native speakers. They worry about making mistakes, sounding silly, or not being understood. Have you ever felt that way, Adam?
Definitely. I remember the first time I tried to have a conversation in English. I was so scared of saying the wrong thing, but I quickly realized that most native speakers are kind and patient. They're usually impressed that you're making the effort to learn their language.
That's so true. Most people appreciate the effort and are happy to help. A great way to start is by finding low-pressure environments like language exchange meetups or online communities. Apps like Tandem and HelloTalk connect you with native speakers who are also learning your language, so it's a win-win.
Yes, those platforms are fantastic. You can text, voice chat, or even video call with native speakers. And because it's an exchange, there's less pressure. You're both learners helping each other.
Another way to engage with native speakers is by joining local language meetups or conversation groups. Many cities have events where people come together to practice different languages. It's a casual and fun way to make new friends while improving your English.
And if in-person meetups aren't an option, there are online events too. Platforms like Zoom or Discord host virtual language exchanges where you can talk with people from all over the world.
Exactly. Another great tip is to start small. You don't need to jump straight into long conversations. Begin with simple interactions, like greeting someone or ordering food in English. These small moments build your confidence over time.
That's a great point, Sophia. Even things like asking for directions or chatting with a store clerk can be excellent practice. And if you make a mistake, no big deal. It's all part of the learning process.
One thing I found helpful is preparing for conversations. For example, if you're meeting a native speaker for a language exchange, think about some topics you'd like to discuss. It could be your hobbies, your favorite movie, or even questions about their culture.
Yes. Having a few questions or phrases ready can make you feel more confident. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you don't understand something. Phrases like, "Can you repeat that?" or "What does that mean?" are super useful.
Another thing to remember is that listening is just as important as speaking. Pay attention to how native speakers form sentences, their pronunciation, and the phrases they use. You can learn a lot just by listening carefully.
Absolutely. And don't forget about mimicking. When you hear a phrase or expression you like, try repeating it. This helps you practice pronunciation and makes it easier to remember.
One final tip. Don't take yourself too seriously. Laugh at your mistakes and enjoy the process. Engaging with native speakers
Our first question
isn't just
comes from
about
Maria
improving your
in Spain.
English.
She
It's
asks,
also
how can I
about
practice
connecting
English
with
if I
people
don't have anyone
and
to talk
learning
to?
about different
Great
cultures.
question, Maria.
Well said, Sophia. So, to recap, here are some tips for engaging with native speakers. 1. Use apps like Tandem or HelloTalk for language exchanges. 2. Join local or online conversation groups to practice in a supportive environment. 3. Start with small, everyday interactions to build confidence. 4. Prepare topics or questions in advance to guide your conversations. 5. Actively listen and mimic phrases to improve your pronunciation and fluency. 6. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification when you don't understand. 7. Enjoy the process and don't let fear hold you back.
Engaging with native speakers is a game changer. It's not just about improving your language skills, it's also about building real connections and understanding different perspectives. All right, it's time for one of our favorite parts of the podcast, Listener Q&A. We've received some great questions from our listeners about improving English skills, and we're excited to answer them.
Yes, thank you to everyone who sent in questions. If we don't get to yours today, don't worry, we'll feature more in future episodes. So, let's dive into the first question. That's a common challenge, Maria, but there are plenty of ways to practice solo. You can use language learning apps like Duolingo, Babbel, or Busuu to build vocabulary and practice conversations with AI. Shadowing is another great technique. Listen to native speakers in videos or podcasts and repeat after them to improve pronunciation and fluency.
Absolutely. You can also record yourself speaking. For example, talk about your day, describe something you see, or even make up a story. Listening to your recordings helps you catch mistakes and track your progress over time.
And don't forget about journaling. Writing daily in English can help improve your grammar and sentence structure. You could even join online forums or comment on social media posts to practice writing with real people.
Next up, we have a question from Ahmed in Egypt. He asks, "How do I stop translating everything in my head before I speak?" Such an important question.
Great question, Ahmed. The key is to start thinking in English as much as possible. It's a skill that takes time, but you can practice by labeling things around you in English, talking to yourself in English, or describing your surroundings in your head.
Exactly. Another trick is to memorize phrases and chunks of language instead of individual words. For example, learn, "Can I have a cup of coffee?" as one unit instead of translating word by word. This helps your brain process language more naturally.
And don't worry if it feels slow at first. Over time, your brain will start recognizing patterns, and speaking in English will become more automatic.
Here's a question from Priya in India. How do I improve my English accent? What do you think, Adam?
Good one, Priya. Improving your accent starts with listening. Watch videos, movies, or podcasts in the accent you want to learn, like American, British, or Australian. Pay attention to how they pronounce certain sounds and try to mimic them.
Yes, and practice specific sounds that are difficult for you. For example, many learners struggle with the thakit sound in English. Practicing these sounds regularly can make a big difference. Tongue twisters are also a fun way to improve pronunciation. Another tip is to slow down when speaking. Clarity is more important than speed. Over time, your accent will naturally improve as your confidence grows. Here's a fun one from Julia in Brazil. What's the fastest way to learn slang and casual expressions? I love this question.
Me too. Julia, the best way to learn slang is by immersing yourself in content where it's used. Watch TV shows, movies, or YouTube videos in English, especially ones with casual, everyday dialogue. Shows like Friends or Brooklyn Nine-Nine are perfect for this.
And don't forget social media. Platforms like TikTok and Instagram are full of native speakers using slang in real time. Just be cautious about the context. Some slang is regional or very informal, so make sure it's appropriate before you use it.
You can also ask native speakers during language exchanges. They'll love teaching you the latest slang and might even explain the cultural context behind it.
Okay, one last question for today. This one is from Tarek in Morocco. He asks, "What should I do if I feel embarrassed speaking in front of others?" Such an important topic.
Great question, Tarek. First of all, know that feeling embarrassed is completely normal. Everyone feels this way when they're learning a new language. The best way to overcome it is to start small. Practice speaking with a trusted friend or a language partner who won't judge you.
Yes. And remember, people are usually supportive and impressed when you're learning their language. Focus on communicating your message rather than being perfect. Over time, the fear of embarrassment will fade as your confidence grows.
Also, remind yourself that mistakes are a part of learning. Instead of seeing them as failures, view them as stepping stones to success. Laugh it off, learn from it, and move forward.
Wow, such great questions today. Thank you to everyone who sent them in. If you have more questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. All right. It's time for a little fun before we wrap up the episode. Our bonus segment, Funny Language Fails. Learning a language comes with its fair share of hilarious moments, and we've all been there.
Oh, absolutely. Mistakes can be embarrassing at the time, but they make for the best stories later. I'll start with one of mine. When I was learning English, I once walked into a bakery and confidently asked for a pineapple biscuit. The baker just stared at me and said, "Do you mean a pineapple pastry? I didn't even know there was a difference."
That's a good one. I once mixed up kitchen and chicken in a conversation. I told someone, I love spending time in the chicken. They laughed so hard and I had no idea why until they explained it later.
That's hilarious, Sophia. I've heard of people mixing up similar words like that. One of my friends said angry instead of hungry at a restaurant, so they told the waiter, "I'm very angry, I need food." The waiter looked a little scared at first.
Oh no. That reminds me of when I was learning Spanish. I wanted to say estoy embarazada, thinking it meant I'm embarrassed, but it actually means I'm pregnant. The look on people's faces was unforgettable.
Classic. False friends, words that sound the same but mean completely different things, are such a common trap. I once said bored instead of boring in a presentation. I told the audience, "I'm very bored talking about this topic. Not my best moment."
That's amazing. One of our listeners, Priya, sent in her own funny fail. She wrote, I once told my boss that I was going to dye a document instead of type it. He looked so concerned until I corrected myself.
That's priceless. And it goes to show that language fails are universal. The key is to laugh them off and learn from them.
Exactly. Mistakes like these are a sign you're putting yourself out there, which is the most important thing. And honestly, these funny moments make learning memorable and enjoyable.
Totally agree. If you're listening and have your own funny language fail, send it our way. We'd love to feature it in a future episode. Sharing these moments reminds us all that it's okay to laugh at ourselves as we learn.
Great idea, Adam. And who knows? Your story might inspire someone else to keep going, even when they're struggling. So, embrace those fails, everyone. They're part of the journey.
Well, that's it for today's episode of our podcast. We hope you enjoyed our tips, stories, and of course, the funny language fails.
Yes, and remember, learning a language is a journey, full of challenges, growth, and plenty of laughs along the way. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and celebrate your progress, no matter how small.
If you found this episode helpful, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to leave a comment telling us your own language learning tips or funny moments. We'd love to hear from you.
Also, if you have any questions, suggestions for future episodes, or just want to say hi, drop us a message. We're always here to support you on your English learning journey.
Until next time, keep practicing, stay positive, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. See you in the next episode.